Hey everyone, and welcome back to Lost Ark, where in today's update video I am going to be talking about my machinist. For this one I'm going to be playing the Arthetinean technology build, aka AT Scouter, as this is going to be my favorite of the two playstyles. Now AT Scouter doesn't really have the best reputation in the game at the moment. It is the least played class by far when you compare it to all of the other classes, but I think it's a lot of fun, and today I'm going to show you just how much fun he can be. And he's actually kind of strong at the moment as well with the blunt thorn build. He can definitely take cruel fighter as well if you end up playing it well. However, he does have a couple of issues which I will also talk about. So let's get started. The overall identity of AT Scouter, I guess you could say, is in his three different types of skills. So we have skills that will activate or use the character itself. As you can see right here, my character itself is doing the attacks. However, we also have a drone that we can maneuver around, and this drone can also do attacks on its own. So as you can see, I can send my drone out to do something, and my character can still move around, and I can also recall my drone whenever I want to. Now, the main thing about AT is that you want to combine these two types of skills together to work in unison. So I send out my drone to do one skill, whereas my character does another, and so you do the best DPS possible because your drone is doing something and you are doing something, and while you are doing things together, you're just pulling out your DPS. Of course, last but not least, we also have our purple skills where me and the drone combine to do our strongest attacks that we have. Now, to work together with this, you can also see that I kind of have two lights next to my machinist whenever I use a yellow or a blue skill. If I use a blue skill, you can now see that I have this blue icon next to me, and if I use a yellow skill, you can see I have the yellow icon. Having these active will empower your next purple skill. So now I have a blue and a yellow active. I use a purple skill to consume them and to deal bonus damage. So that's essentially going to be what you want to do with your rotation. You want to go ahead and use the blue and the yellows, use a purple skill, use another blue and yellow together, use another purple skill, yellow, blue, reapply synergy, another purple skill, and that's kind of going to be the majority of the gameplay. The last little bit that you have to pay attention to is this skill right here, Mobile Shot. On top of it being a damage skill and a mobility skill, this will also give you a movement speed increase, and this is going to allow you to cap out Raid Captain. So do try and have that up every time that you do damage to the boss, so that you're capped on Raid Captain. That's kind of how Machinist works. However, we're not quite there yet. So the first thing that I should talk about is his identity gauge. So normally you use the identity to transform into a little robot and then you can do damage that way, but AT is not going to be using this. Now the problem is that in order for AT to have access to its damage buff, this thing needs to be fully charged. And if we use our robot at any point in the game, or if we die, then we are going to be losing all of our gauge and we have to rebuild it from scratch. We can rebuild this gauge by detaching our drone and recalling it, because this will give us a chunk of our gauge. However, this does have a long cooldown, so while you can do this while you're waiting to go into a fight, and then when the cooldown is over, okay, we pull it back, and now we need to wait 10 seconds again before I can do this. Whenever you're going into a fight straight away, you might want to just use a stimulant to have access to your identity straight away. One more thing that you can do at the start of a fight is you can also send out your awakening, as your awakening will also fully fill up your identity gauge if you combine it with one drone detachment. So that's one way that you can very quickly get your gauge up as well. Just won't work when you're doing a Guardian raid, because by the time you get your awakening back, the fight is probably over and you would probably rather use your hyper awakening instead. In terms of awakenings, we can only use this one because the other awakening is for when you are in your transformation, so that is why we are only going to be using Airstrike as our main awakening. One last thing to talk about then, before I talk about the build itself, is going to be our synergy. So Machinist has two synergies, this one and the one that you shoot out. This is the good synergy, whereas the other one is the not so good synergy, and I'm gonna quickly take this one off my hotbar and I'll put the other one on. The reason why this synergy is not as great is because it has a lot of travel time and it's a very narrow impact point as well. So if you end up missing it, just like that, I didn't land my synergy, it feels really bad. Now, the reason why you might want to use Pulse Fire instead is because this one gives you a whole lot more battery gauge. Machinist does not use mana, and so it is not affected by support buffs unless you're playing with a Paladin, because Paladin is unique and for some reason he does give you battery gauge. So because of that, running Pulse Fire is kind of the way to go, because it has this battery charge tripod over here. So every time you land it, you get a bunch of battery back. However, it is possible to run overcharged battery, this synergy, which is much nicer to use, much easier to land, also just stays on the field for a very long time, and every time it hits, it will reapply that synergy as well. But if you want to do that, it does require you to have a bracelet with Combat Source Natural Recovery. I have 8%, it's not enough on all fights. In, for example, Mordum, Gate 3, where you have very high uptime on the boss, I need to do something special to kind of help with my mana problems, or my battery problems, I should say. However, there are a couple of fixes which I'll talk about when we go through the build. So that's the overall gameplay. Just apply synergy, use a yellow and a blue skill, use a purple, yellow and a blue skill, use another purple, yellow and a blue skill, use another purple, and then you just kind of keep it going like that. And you try and line up your yellow and your blue skills together. One thing to note is that when you send out your drone and you use a purple skill, it will cancel whatever the drone is doing. If you send out your drone from here and you then recall it, you see that not everything ended up hitting the boss. So you do need to make sure that when your drone is doing something, let it finish before you end up recalling it for a joint attack, for example, with your purple skills, or if you just manually recall it because you want to reposition. So that is something to keep in mind as well. So let's then talk about the build. We're going to be a very high crit focus build because we're going to be running Blunt Thorn on this guy. Engravings, Grudge, Mass Increase, Adrenaline, Raid Captain, Keen Blunt. Raid Captain we can do because of this dodge roll that we have. This gives us our movement speed for Raid Captain. And every time that we kind of shoot a yellow skill, we're also going to be stacking our reload buff, and reload also gives us attack speed and movement speed. So that is why we can also run Mass Increase on this build. Gems, we're just going to be running damage and cooldown on just about everything that does damage in our build, and then Mobile Shot we're taking a cooldown gem because this is what gives us Raid Captain, so that's why we kind of want that. Everything else is just very standard damage and cooldown on our strongest skills. If you want, you can take off the cooldown gem here and put it into a damage gem for Avalanche, but honestly Avalanche doesn't do that much damage, so having the cooldown gem here to make sure your Raid Captain is up all the time is going to be better. So let's now look at our skill build. So over here we have Mobile Shot. I've got Poison Rune on this one, Quick Prep, and then Quickness. This is what gives you that movement speed. Overcharged Battery. I have a Bleed Rune on this. This is our Synergy. So we have our Synergy skill over here, and then Continuous Explosion, which makes it deal bonus explosions so that we have more synergy applications throughout to just have an easier uptime on this. Avalanche running Conviction, Battery Charge, 0 degree aim, and then Concise Finish. This is the one that can kind of help with your battery troubles. So normally I like running this version, the Mobility Tripod, because this allows you to jump forward a whole lot further. This is also your counter skill, so having the extra mobility on it can be quite useful, but in fights where you have high uptime, you kind of need to run Battery Charge if you're running Overcharged Battery, because otherwise you're going to run out of battery. If you're running Pulse Fire, then you can take the Movement Tripod instead, and not really have to worry about your battery too much, but again, then you need to run the shitty version of your Synergy. Baby Drones, this is one of my judgment skills, and these are the tripods on here. The reason why I am running two conviction skills, or two judgment skills I should say, is because I really need my conviction judgment to basically proc on cooldown, and I don't want to have to care about needing my conviction judgment skills to line up, because as you can see, 12 seconds cooldown, 18 second cooldown, that's never going to stay aligned throughout the fight, so I don't really want to worry about lining up conviction judgment every time. That is why I am running two judgment skills. You can also put a Overrun rune on here, for example, to make it do a lot of stagger, but honestly the stagger is already quite alright on this class, so that's why I'm just running double judgment to make sure my conviction judgment procs basically off cooldown, and then these are the tripods for that. Annihilation mode, again tripods, battery saving, very useful here. Energy Buster, These are the tripods. There is a push immunity tripod on here, which is very nice to have. However, you're going to be doing a whole lot less damage if you take that. So hopefully they bake that into the skill at some point to just give it tenacity, because this is a very long casting skill. As you can see, you need to charge it, you need to shoot it, you're standing still for a very long time. Would be very nice if you actually had built-in tenacity on this. And then last but not least, we have Carpet. I've put a Purify rune on this, but you can run whatever, quick recharge, like put a Bleed rune or Poison rune on there if you haven't got it anywhere else. And then again, battery saving, very important, and then the rest. Let's then take a look at our arc passives. Nothing too out of the ordinary here for a Blunt Thorn build. Full crit, more crit, and then Blunt Thorn. If you have a crit synergy, you can drop, for example, 1 point in Zealous Smite and put it into Destruction Charger instead. But if you're just wanting a general purpose build that is Blunt Thorn efficient on its own, this is the build. Enlightenment all the way down, except we're not going to be putting 3 points into the Enhanced Core or Enchanted Core, because while this does give damage and crit rate, we don't necessarily need the crit rate, because even with this, I am fully Blunt Thorn efficient, and we're actually getting more damage out of having this at level 5, because the main damaging skills are going to be your T-skill and your big laser beam. Those are by far your 2 biggest damaging skills, so this is just going to be boosting them more. And I also took 1 point into Tactical Reload to give me that natural battery recovery rate whenever we do get those stacks, because otherwise, again, battery might become an issue. For the leap tree, I am mostly just going to be taking damage and cooldown for our T skill. Right now I have 1 point in here because of I'm still working on my karma, but it will look like this when it is finished. Again, if it is a shorter fight, take the points out of cooldown reduction and put them into Transcend Power instead. And then you can take battery cost reduction here if you want to kind of help with that. But this just makes it deal so much more damage that it's kind of not worth taking the battery cost reduction, and you should just work around fixing your battery issues elsewhere in your build. So you want to take this because it just does so much more damage. So yeah, that's the leap tree, enlightenment tree, evolution tree, very standard for a Blunt Thorn character. Skill build, engravings, gems, went over basically just about everything. The only downside to this class, honestly, is that it has a lot of delayed damage, like this one, for example. Boss needs to stand still. It's a very tiny area that it hits as well. Same thing with Raid Missile. It's very easy to miss those kind of skills. And then, of course, your 2 biggest hitting skills are very long charge times and cast time skills. And they do not have any push immunity on them. They do have paralysis immunity, thank God, but they don't have push immunity on them. So that is kind of a drawback. As well as the fact that you need your core to be fully charged. If you ever decide to go into your mech for safety, because it does give you a big shield, you are going to be losing out on all of your damage. Luckily enough, if your awakening is up, you can get it back really quick by just awakening and then detaching your drone real quick. But again, not really ideal. But that's gonna do it for Machinist. If you've got any more questions about the class, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll definitely get back to you. But for now, I want to thank you for watching and I'll see you tomorrow in the next one.